Welcome to the St. Michael's audio trail. You can follow the entire trail in sequence, which takes about 35 minutes, or you can pick and mix your own segments using the menu. Any time that you need to move somewhere, you can press pause while you get in position. Let's begin with a 2-minute introduction. There is no special location for this part. Feel free to press pause if you want to find somewhere to sit. There has been a Christian church on this location since at least the end of the 1200s, and maybe long before. The church has been rebuilt several times over the years, and the oldest parts of the current building date back to the 13th century. St. Michael's is used by many people. There are regular worshippers and other people who live or work in the town, visit it as tourists, or use it as a meeting place. The church is used as a venue for concerts, meetings, training courses, schools, and many other groups. All of these are welcome, and we hope that you feel welcome too. So, St. Michael's has depth and breadth. It has the depth of its historic past, and it has breadth from being used so widely within the community. Nevertheless, since its foundation, it has been primarily a place where the Christian gospel has been proclaimed in many ways, both before and after the Reformation. That gospel continues to be the reason we are here. On this tour, we hope to share some of the journey of St. Michael's together.
The history of the building. The first church.
The parish church of St. Michael and All Angels stand on the highest point of town, with the front opening onto the marketplace and the back looking across the Bollin Valley to the hills beyond. Our church is a royal foundation, given to the town by Queen Eleanor of Castile as a chapelry to Prestbury. Prestbury was bigger and more important than Macclesfield in the early Middle Ages. From the 1st to the 3rd of October 1278, Queen Eleanor and her husband, King Edward I, were here to see the church consecrated by the Bishop of St. Asaph. As a royal foundation, it was probably meant to be something special. Some of the best architects and masons in Europe were in Chester at the time, building the king's castles at Harlech, Carnarvon, Conway and Beaumaris. However, because of the ups and downs of the Welsh campaign, the churches were not always finished according to plan.
We can make some informed guesses as to what the church looked like in Queen Eleanor's time. In the welcome area, on the left wall, as you look out into the marketplace, you can see the remnants of one of the arches from the west end of the nave of the first church. The head is of King Edward I and has been restored more recently than 1278. Through the modern wooden door on the other side of the base of the tower, there is a matching remnant of arch showing Queen Eleanor, although as this has not been restored, her features are not so clear as the king's. These arches indicate the likely width of the medieval nave. Now walk into the current nave through the glass doors and turn right to get to the south aisle. Now turn back to look towards the tower. The tall arch enclosing the lift space gives an idea of the height and width of the medieval nave. The two side chapels on your left, the Lee Chapel and the Savage Chapel, were added in about 1450 and 1505 respectively. The Savage Chapel is the larger of the two and has its own tower.
The Georgian Church.
The best place to listen to this section is in the nave, near the glass doors. Feel free to take a seat. As Macclesfield expanded in the 1700s with the growth of the silk industry, so Queen Eleanor's church became too small. Christian observance had changed too, with the emphasis now on preaching and hymn singing. The only space for St. Michael's to expand was to the north, which is on your left as you sit facing the altar. So, between 1739 and 1740, everything except the two chapels and the two towers was taken down, and the church was rebuilt
wider, higher and lighter, taking a big step to the north. The old nave became the south aisle. The new church was in the classical style, with big arched windows and giant pilasters. Inside it was packed with galleries, box pews and a pair of tall pulpits at the east end. Not much is left of the Georgian church. The main relics are the two fine brass chandeliers, the font and the gates and gateposts outside. One chandelier was given in 1744 and the other in 1832. They create a magical effect in candlelit services at Christmas. The organ of 1803, which must have been in the gallery, is now in St Albans Roman Catholic Church, about half a mile away.
The present church.
The 1740 church, designed for preaching, didn't match the Victorians' idea of how a church should be. Too mundane, no mystery, and the classical style was thought inappropriate. In 1882, James Stephens, architect of many buildings in the town, prepared a design for a complete new church in the Gothic style. Unfortunately, the floor and the foundations ate up most of the money. Work stopped with only the chancel built. That's the airy section at the east end of the church, with the high altar and the hammer beam roof. The job of building the rest had to wait more than a decade, and in 1899 the work progressed under Sir Arthur Blomfield, an unadventurous but reliable London architect. The current church opened after his death in 1901.
The nave.
You are now at the central part of the building, at the church's heart, the focus for a worshipping community, visible and open to all. The simple wooden table is the place where bread and wine are consecrated and then offered to the people. There is a cross and an open Bible on the table, a sign that the good news of the Christian faith is sent out from here. The low staging is a 21st century addition, purely functional, to enable better vision from the untiered seating, and movable for concerts, etc., of which there are many. Now, with the entrance doors behind you, the view is to the chancel and sanctuary, a more secluded space leading to the high altar, a special holy place, the focus for worship in previous centuries. Turn round again, and you look out to the town, through the open door, the name given to the alterations made to the church 20-odd years ago. Turn back and to your left and take a close look at the 19th century pulpit, in lavishly carved dark wood with 6 figures on it: Jesus with his hand on the orb, St. George slaying the evil dragon, and the 4 gospel writers, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. But it has not been used for preaching sermons since the last reordering. This pulpit was intended to place the priest well above the people, and at a time with no electronic sound system, it was an aid for voice projection, down to the nave and up to the gallery. Nearby is the stained glass window showing 3 women: Mary, the mother of Jesus, her mother, Anne, and her cousin Elizabeth, the mother of John the Baptist. And it's unusual in that it shows 3 important women, all mothers, but not here shown as being involved with childcare. Is this an example of early feminism? Across to your right is the splendid brass eagle lectern, considered too grand for modern taste, but brought out as a special treat at Christmas. You may have noticed the television screen mounted on a pillar, facing away from the congregation, the wrong way. But in fact, it is strategically sited to face those leading the service from the stage and the choir, who are no longer tucked away in the chancel, but placed just beyond the stage, facing the people, but unable to see the overhead screen which displays the order of service, hence their private television.
Now go through the side door near the Eagle to the Savage Chapel.
The Savage Chapel.
The Savage Chapel is one of the oldest parts of the church and dates from the early 16th century. The Savage family were prominent in Macclesfield and were connected by marriage to the powerful Stanley family. Thomas Savage became Archbishop of York and donated the chapel in 1504. Members of the family were buried here in the 16th and 17th centuries. As you enter the chapel, on the right there is a copy of the rare Breeches Bible and the Lee Pardon brass. Pardon brasses were sometimes given to those who made donations to the church. Above the largest tomb there is a door and a small window. It was here that the first teacher of the King's School was reputed to live. The room may also have been used by Dame Joan, an anchoress, who withdrew from society to live a life of prayer. In the opposite corner of the chapel is a squint, a gap in the wall, which would have looked from the chapel towards the high altar. The stained glass windows are notable. They include the three graces, Faith, Charity, Hope, by William Morris, from a sketch by Edward Burne-Jones. The larger windows depict the life of Jesus, his birth, death, and ascension into heaven. The four narrow windows above the altar depict St. Chad, Bishop of Lichfield, Archbishop Savage, St. Werburgh, patron saint of Chester, and Queen Eleanor, who founded this church. This beautiful chapel is still used for worship and prayer every day.
Now go back to the nave, turn left, and left again to look at the Lee Chapel.
The Lee Chapel.
The Lee Chapel was built around 1442 by Sir Peter Lee of Lyme, the same family who lived at Lyme Park, a well-known nearby stately home, now owned by the National Trust. Sir Peter built the chapel to receive the bones of his father and grandfather. His father, Sir Piers Lee, fought at Agincourt and died in Paris in 1422 following the siege of Meaux. His grandfather, Perkin Ali, had been executed. We know this because it is inscribed on the unpolished brass on the south wall, which begins as follows.
Here lieth the body of Perkin Ali, that for King Richard the death did die, betrayed for righteousness, and the bones of Sir Piers his son, that with King Henry V did win in Paris.
The grandfather, known as Perkin Ali, but really another Sir Piers, had been knighted in 1397 by Richard II, but was executed at Chester only 2 years later, following Henry Bolingbroke's coup. As with the Savage Chapel, the Lee Chapel has seen several different naves come and go through the ages. If you look carefully at the stones, you can see the different textures from different eras. On the left of the Lee Chapel, we see a large octagonal font, a reminder that in years gone by, this is where baptisms took place. The themes of water and baptism are picked up in the large stained-glass window, which was made in 1903. On the wall above the font there are several brasses and a stone memorial commemorating schoolmasters who taught in a school here in the 15 and 1600s. You can make out the names of William Lee and John Brownsword. William Lee's proficiency in languages is celebrated in inscriptions in Latin, Greek and Hebrew. John Brownsword also taught at Stratford-upon-Avon and may have taught William Shakespeare.
The memorials.
The location for this section is the chancel, near the high altar.
The memorials in St Michael's are recognised to be one of the finest collection of medieval alabaster memorials in the north of England. And although many of them are in not particularly good condition, they give us they're interesting in that they give very interesting pictures of clothing, armour and shoes of their time. However, the attribution of some of them is debated and has been attempted over the years by the style of clothing as well as some historical records. The tombs would originally have been in the Savage Chapel and were moved at the time of the restoration in about 1900. The bodies would have been buried in the floor of the Savage Chapel, and some of them were actually found at that time. To look at the memorials, go up into the chancel where you can see the oldest tomb and the most modern. The tomb on the right is the fourth John Savage and his wife Catherine Stanley. Due to this marriage, the Savages switched their allegiance in the Cousins' Wars, known as the Wars of the Roses, to support the Yorkist Tudors, who were favoured by the Stanleys. This marriage potentially changed the course of English history. The monument is very unusual in that the couple are holding hands, and this suggests a love match, which might not have been usual in their class at the time. A number of children are featured underneath. Numbered among these would have been another John V, and Thomas, who later became Archbishop of York and founded the Savage Chapel. On the north wall is probably the oldest memorial of a Downs of Shrigley and illustrates hairstyles and armour of the time. The very grand Earl Rivers memorial, nearer to the organ on the north side, was carved by William Stanton, a famous sculptor, and dates from about 1694. Thomas Earl Rivers was the great-great-grandson of John Savage VIII, buried in the Savage Chapel. Savages inherited the title of Baron Rock Savage and Earl Rivers by marriage. Now go down to look at the two reclining knights in the south aisle near the lectern. The one on your left, the more easterly one, is now, or maybe, John Savage III or the second. John Savage was knighted at Agincourt in 1415 and wears a Lancastrian collar. John V is to his right near the lectern. John led the left flank of Lord Stanley's army at the Battle of Bosworth. Lord Stanley had promised allegiance to Richard III but held back, watched the course of the battle, and the story goes that he decided on which side his bread was buttered and switched to support Henry Tudor at the last minute, thus ensuring Henry's victory, the death of Richard III, and the start of the Tudor dynasty of monarchs. That starts a very interesting story about the death and burial of Richard III. John was knighted by Henry VII for his contribution, and Catherine's eldest brother, William Stanley, was created Earl of Derby in honour of his contribution. This memorial is probably not an accurate picture of the man. He's over 7 feet tall, but it's interesting to follow the change in style of armour and hairstyle. One of the shields under the tomb, the one in the centre, has the arms of the province of York, reflecting his brother Thomas Savage. John V was killed at Boulogne in 1492. Now go into the Savage Chapel to see the next Sir John, number 7, with his wife Elizabeth, daughter of the Earl of Worcester, John died in 1527, and again the clothing detail is worth a look. An unusual memorial is adjacent to this in the centre of the south wall, which is believed to be a Thomas Liversidge, who died in 1467. The missing section might have supported an engraved stone, because similar memorials have been seen elsewhere. The final memorial is to John Savage VIII, which is on the west wall, and this has been badly damaged, probably during the Civil War. John's wife was the daughter of the Earl of Rutland, and her higher status is shown by her higher level. This was originally painted, and some of the paint remains. John was buried in a very grand funeral ceremony described in detail in records at midnight, which was apparently usual at the time.
The stained glass.
This section starts on the right-hand side of the nave, past the Golden Eagle, behind the organ console.
Stained glass. This part of the visit moves around the building, so you may need to pause the recording while you walk to the next window. The rebuilding of St Michael's in 1901 left clear glass in all the windows. Over the next 20 years, this was replaced as a result of the generosity of the local community and of some individuals. The timing coincided with the flourishing of the arts and crafts movement, and the quality reflects the links between Macclesfield's silk manufacturers and the leading designers of the day. Start in the southeast corner of the worship area behind the organ console. The window here depicts the ascension of Christ to heaven in the centre, with St John on the left and Jesus' mother Mary on the right. This is described in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 24. The design is by Christopher Wall, a key figure in the design and manufacture of stained glass, and the figure radiates shafts of light. This design is distinctly different from others in the building. Heart-shaped flames are distinctive of the arts and crafts movement. Next, open the door to the youth centre to your left and go into the youth centre if the room is not in use. The window to the south is unusual in that it depicts the Holy Family in a domestic setting, with the teenage Jesus sweeping up his father Joseph's wood shavings. This is not a biblical picture, but nonetheless suggests that everything we do, including our daily grind, is holy. Our faith is not just for Sundays. The window was designed by Paul Woodroffe, who was a pupil of Richard Wall, and Paul Woodroffe was actually born in Chennai, India, the son of a diplomat. Now look at the huge east window in the chancel. Get there either via the outer door from the youth centre, the other door from the youth centre, or going back in front of the organ console. This window was designed and produced by Powell and Sons. The most obvious figure is St Michael in the lower centre, flanked by female saints on the left and male saints on the right. Above St Michael is again depicted the risen Christ, surrounded by golden flames symbolising his supreme power, and at the very top there is a dove which represents the Holy Spirit. Small coats of arms near the top are those of Queen Eleanor and Queen Victoria. Now go down the steps and look at the window nearest to the organ pipes. This depicts three women: Mary, mother of Jesus, Elizabeth, her cousin, and Anna, the mother of Mary. Unusually, these women are not pictured as mothers, but with a book. This window is sometimes called the suffragette window and may be an example of early feminism. The central window on the north aisle is a memorial to the Boer War. It was designed by Kemper, and its colours, red, white and blue, reflect a patriotic theme. Now walk across the worship area to the Savage Chapel. Immediately in front of you are a pair of windows depicting, first of all, the birth of Christ and the adoration of the Magi, and the Crucifixion of Christ. Both of these are designs by Burne-Jones and were supplied by Morris & Co. in 1917 and tell key elements of the story of Christ. The east window in the Savage Chapel was commissioned and paid for by the people of Macclesfield in memory of Francis Dickon Brocklehurst, who had done many good works in the town. It was designed by Henry Durl of Morris & Co. and is a reproduction of a window in Troon, Ayrshire. It again depicts the ascension of Christ, but this time he is observed by 11 disciples as well as angels. Christ defeats death and ascends to his Father in glory. This is a perpetual reminder for us that death is not the end, and Christ defeated death for all. The small 3-light window in the corner is by Burne-Jones, and it's taken from stock designs depicting faith, hope and charity. Now leave the Savage Chapel and look in the Lee Chapel. This was originally a baptistry, and the window, designed by Shrigley and Hunt, depicts stylized saints associated with baptism. Go through the door in the southwest corner near the Lee Chapel to the lobby. The window here is a memorial to a daughter, and appropriately, perhaps, shows Cecilia, the patron saint of music, and St. Margaret, the patron saint of childbirth. I wonder if she was a musical lady who died in childbirth. The windows in the southwest corner of the church, now inside the lobby, are all war memorials, associated with the memorials to Macclesfield men named on brass plates in the area. A small window to the right of the door by Tuke yet again depicts St. Michael, this time slaying a dragon. Now go up the stairs, or the lift if you prefer, to the first floor level to see the magnificent war memorial window by Burne-Jones. There is much symbolism here. White butterflies represent purity, birth and resurrection, but rest on brambles for hardship and desolation. Look carefully at the ruined town on the right-hand side and see that it is the same as the intact one on the left. Soldiers and ordinary men and women are seen. The war impacted everyone. I particularly love the little girl bottom right picking daisies. What does she symbolise? Christ gestures to the chalice at his feet, inviting all to take part in the Eucharist. Take some time to look carefully at this window, look at the detail, and reflect on how it speaks to you. Higher still, above the lift, is another Morris window from Burne-Jones Designs, symbolising justice and humility. It is a memorial to 2 former mayors of Macclesfield and their wives. I wonder if the theme reflects their characters. A dove, representing the Holy Spirit, can be seen in the drapery. Now, to get a view of the large west window, go into the meeting room on the first floor. This window was a memorial to Queen Victoria, who died during the reconstruction of the church. Is this why her eyes are closed? Designed by Powell & Sons, it contains a lot of detail. The heraldic shields are those of the Bishop of Chester, Archbishops of York, Lord Lieutenants of Chester, and the Royal Coat of Arms. The Beatitudes come from Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, and they're featured as well as representations of virtues. Continue through the other door to the meeting room to see the final war memorial to John Close Brooks, who was killed at Ypres in 1914. Again, this depicts St. Michael with flanking warriors, valour and fortitude, who look remarkably similar to St. Michael because he used the same model for all 3. This window was paid for by parishioners. I wonder why John deserved this when so many men died. John's family were bankers and lived at Birtles Hall, not even in the town itself. The vestry isn't normally open, but in there's a window which is a memorial to the churchwarden John Hadfield. It symbolises peace and rest. This amuses me. These are things much needed by church wardens.
The Tower.
Welcome to St Michael's Church Tower. This is one of the oldest parts of the church. The inside of the tower, up to the top of the clock, was most likely the tower of the original 13th century church. The Georgians refaced it in fine stone and extended it upwards to accommodate a larger belfry. After the reordering of the church in 2000, the church offices now take up the ground floor. If you go upstairs and stand outside the first floor ringing room, you can look inside. You'll see 12 bell ropes, complete with their bright red sallies, one rope for each of the 12 bells. To find this many bells in a parish church is not so common, and St Michael's is the only example in the diocese. On the wall to the right are 2 18th century stone tablets recording the ringer's rules. The first, from 1701, records such gems as, "He who rings in spur or hat, 6 pence in ale must pay for that." The later tablet from 1777 is rather more proper, and references to ale become a payment to the sexton, along with requirements for good behaviour. The next floor houses only the clock pendulum, and some nesting boxes for swifts supplied by the RSPB, sadly as yet unoccupied. Above that is the clock, which in 2022 passed the 200th anniversary of its installation. It used to be wound by hand twice a week, but in the 1980s electric motors were installed to raise the weights that drive it. At the next level we find the magnificent bells, all cast at the same time by John Taylor and Company of Loughborough in 1923. The biggest bell is 1.3 tons, and for their weight they are among the finest in the country. From here, up a steep, narrow stairway, we can get out onto the roof. Moving around up here is quite challenging, but there are good views across the town and out to the surrounding countryside. If you are interested in seeing all this for yourself, there is a virtual tour. Just open YouTube and search for St Michael's Macclesfield Tower Tour.
The churchyard.
From the front west door, facing the marketplace, turn left and left again to the south door. On the right side of the stone archway are 3 older stones dating back to the medieval church. Look for the consecration cross from 1278. Continue around the Savage Tower to the stones lined up along the south wall. Some represent angels. These come from the 1278 church, and many have their faces removed during the Reformation. Continue to the raised beds in the southeast corner of the churchyard. One is producing fruit, vegetables and herbs for the local community and Angel at My Table. The cafe in the church welcome area. The other includes a variety of aromatic, tactile and noisy plants to interest visitors with visual or other impairments. Retrace your steps to the 2 smaller octagonal raised beds. These contain a variety of wildflowers planted to attract pollinators. St Michael's is an eco-church and is committed to raising the biodiversity of the churchyard and providing a place for peaceful relaxation. Take time to reflect and pray while reading the sign fixed to one of these raised beds.